So today we're outside because I feel like this video has to be a bit more upbeat instead of being in my dingy dark room. And as you guys can tell, I've changed my username. I'm now poetically Cismaan. I feel like that summarizes me quite well. And something I've been hiding from you guys is the fact that I'm actually really into poetry, spoken word, literature. I'm just really an avid literature consumer, if that makes sense. And I produce it as well. I do write a few poets. I do like to write. And I know I like to make everything have a deeper meaning, but in life, everything's poetry. Like, our whole lives are pretty much just poetry. And I find that beautiful because humans never run out of things to write about. Like, there's always new things to write about, always new things to figure out, always new things to experience. And speaking of experience, let me give you guys my backstory on poetry. So it was 2021, COVID time. Everybody was shut indoors, and I think I was in a dark place, in my opinion. I was in a really dark place in terms of I wasn't going out. I think a lot of people were in dark places, but in my case, I wasn't going out, and the person I am, I enjoy being sociable. I enjoy being with people, with being in nature as well. I'm just the outside kind of person. Some people are homebodies, as people like to say. But for me, personally, I like being outside. I love exploring. I love being outside of my usual settings. So I'm Somali, and I come from the nation of poets. We were once known as, and still known as, the nation of poets. And as I got into poetry, I got into my own culture. And as someone who's born in the United Kingdom and not Somalia, you could say I have not been exposed to enough of my culture as it is. And my mother came to this country when she was 18, so there was not a lot that she retained as well, except for her childhood. But I was missing a lot, and I think the reason I was in that dark place was because I didn't know my identity. I didn't have an identity. I didn't know the language. I didn't know my language. I didn't know my people. I didn't know my history. And I'm proud to say that I took that first leap of faith by getting into poetry, specifically Somali poetry and literature. And that really got me into my own identity. I think I hashed out what I am as a person. Because really and truly, I'm not a British person, but it's all I've ever known. So, and I'm sure a lot of people that are diaspora can relate to the fact that even in their own birth land, they don't feel like they belong. I'm pretty sure if you're watching right now and you're from a different country, if you have a British passport or an American passport, but you're not from that country, you've at one point felt like your identity was in a bit of a crisis, basically. So going back to poetry unironically saved my life. Poetry was one of those things that became my outlet. Right now, writing and reading poetry specifically has saved my life. And I know it sounds crazy to say, poetry saved your life, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for my discovery and for my exploration of poetry. I've met countless of people in my life, and I've come across people on the internet and just in the walks of life through poetry, and I'm so indebted to these people. Albeit some of these people are strangers. Some of these people I've never spoken to in person, only through messages and whatnot, but they've impacted my life so much to the point where I've become the person that I am proud to say I am today. Guys, I apologize. I know I've hid the fact that poetry is such a big thing in my life. On this YouTube page, I haven't really posted much poetry. It's more been, fitness, inspirational kind of stuff, you know. But I promise you guys, I'm gonna get into my poetry bag very soon. I've changed my username, so I have to stick to that promise, you know. I can't be poetically Cismaan with no poetry, you know. And one thing I've noticed is that poetry is such a one-sided hobby. Like, there's not many guys that are in it. Like, I was speaking to my uni friend not too long ago, and he was like, it's so strange that you're into poetry, Cismaan. Even though you are from the land of poets, the nation of poets, you don't see many guys openly say they're into poetry, into literature, you know, spoken word. Those kind of things are reserved for the opposite gender. And I have a TikTok page where, upon me getting into poetry, I started reposting it on that account just to get people, just to get surrounded by people who also love poetry. And I amassed a lot of friends that were from the other gender, if that makes sense, or like mutuals from the other gender. But it's really something to think about, because at the end of the day, poetry brings out the human in us. Whether boy, girl, man, woman, child, adult, it brings out the human in us, because it's the perfect way to just bring out the humanity in you. Writing poetry is almost like bleeding on paper. You know, it just spills out. Ask any poet around, or anyone that wrote poetry before, and they'll tell you it's such an easy way of writing. You know, there's some things that are hard to write, right? You know, but poetry just comes out seamlessly, almost as if we're living in these characters' lives. And I know obviously some poems are about our lives and whatnot, but a bunch of poetry is actually about things that are not pertaining to the author's life. Take me for example, I've written tons of poetry where the themes were about, you know, conflict, depression even, childbirth. I've written tons, and I've kind of just adopted these themes and made some sort of character. Something I really like to do is I create this character, this single mother, or this Somali immigrant even. I adopt it as my own, and in my opinion it comes out more freely that way. It comes out more openly because I'm not forcing it. Although there are times where poetry is really hard for me to you know, display. I can't write, like writer's block. It gets me for months, not even just weeks, months on end. And since I have so many other hobbies, it gets overshadowed. Recently, I haven't written a poem for maybe a good couple months now. Like a long hashed out poem, not these like small little tidbits that I do on TikTok, just a long hashed out poem. I've not done it in a long time. And recently, I've also been approached by one of my mutuals, my male mutuals. Shout out you. If you're watching this, I hope you watch this. If you don't, then it's alright. Well, you are my mutual on Instagram, TikTok, everything. And you told me you wanted to post my poetry or a poem that I'm going to be making for you. And I feel like you've reignited this inclination to start writing now. And I think that stems from the fact that I want to help people out. My poems, when I write them, I really do want to affect even 1, 2, 10 people who are going to be reading it. Like, I don't write poems for myself, and I think in my opinion it comes out more naturally that way. It's good to identify what you are as a person, and what I am as a person is someone who likes to give. I like to give my words out. I like to give whatever I write on paper. So it's always important. And let me know what you guys think about the new username, Poetically Cismaan. I was going left and right on usernames. I've been racking my mind about what to pick. And I've been racking my mind about what to call myself on YouTube. I've just had my name for the longest now, Cismaan Abdel Nasser. But I think Poetically Cismaan goes quite well with what I want to express, because everything that I do, everything that I want to aspire to be and to do, you know, whether it's sports, whether it's traveling, whether it's poetry even, I want it to be as poetic as possible. Because for me, poetry or being poetic is freeing, is something that comes really easy to me. I feel like it was written in the stars for me to start poetry. And it was at the end of the day. Allah decreed me to eventually find poetry, and it happened. And we're here now. So I'm honestly so thankful for everybody that I met through poetry and everyone that I've come to love through poetry. And I can't mention love without mentioning my grandma. May Allah grant her the highest of Jannah. I miss her very much. She actually didn't speak a word of English. Let me tell you about my grandma. She didn't speak a word of English. And me being around her for the amount of years that we've lived together, when I was about 12, 13, 14 in high school, I could only speak Somali to her. So by product, I basically learned a good amount of Somali. I mean, I'm still struggling now, but without her, I wouldn't have gone to understand my language as much as I did, as much as I do now. So whenever I always bring up love and language, she comes to mind. My grandma comes to mind. And I don't like to regret, but something I always say to my close friends and family is that I wish I had spoken to her more about poetry, because once I did discover it, I kind of kept it secret. I wasn't really open with it. You know, it's not something that, as a man, in this day and age, you get into. Like, poetry isn't something you get into. You know, it's something that typically, like I said, the other gender gets into. You know, girls and women, they tend to get into, you know, emotions. And I don't like that about us males. I don't like the fact that we're not given an outlet, emotional outlet, for us to, you know, pour into or pour through. We don't have an outlet like that. You know, day to day when I'm with my boys, we don't speak about anything emotional. The most emotional we put in is when we watch a football game, when United loses to Tottenham. That's when we put in emotion. But we don't put in emotion when it comes to things that have really... I mean, football, don't get me wrong, football is poetry. I love football, I love United, you know, I love football, yeah? Even if it's love and hate relationship with United, I love them. But us men, we should be more emotionally in tune with ourselves and with one another. We should be kind of like that one movie with Robin Williams, where they had the poetry club and they were openly bringing out their poems and like what they've written, and they were just saying it out loud. And that movie was quite underrated, and I kind of forgot the name of the movie. It was called The Poet Society or something like that. Anyways, that movie, I'm sure a lot of you guys know the movie if you're watching this, but that movie changed my brain chemistry, because that one movie made me, I don't want to say come out, but it brought out the poet inside me. At first, Cismaan the poet was more so a turtle. He kept everything inside. You know, he never openly spoke about poetry. And now I feel like I'm a different person. I want to express it as much as possible. I want to spread it as much as possible to everyone, to everything. And when I say poetry saved my life, I mean it revolutionized my life. It made me find out more about myself, find out more about Cismaan. And I'm completely indebted to poetry as a concept, as an outlet.